let me begin not by a question, but by telling you about one of the blog posts that I had written, and then I'll speak about one of your podcast episodes, and we'll see where the conversation takes us. So my blog post was about how colleges can be thought of as really three companies in one. So those three companies are LinkedIn, Starbucks, and Coursera.
Lovely.
And what I mean by that is the number one reason the students come to college, nobody says it, of course, but we've all been there, is for the certificate.
Yeah.
So like LinkedIn gives you street cred, that certificate gives you street cred.
Yeah.
Coursera is the teaching bit, the often and unfortunately most ignored part of a college experience.
Absolutely.
And the Starbucks, I use Starbucks because I wanted to make the connotation easily available to anybody, no matter who was reading it. But what I mean by that is the ability to get into a group or congregate at a space. In Marathi, we would have called it a katta. But that perhaps is the most valuable part of the college. The peer network that you build is really what stands you in good stead through the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I wanted to explain all of this is because you had a podcast episode about the uni experience and how because of the pandemic, the uni experience isn't going to work out for a lot of students.
Yeah.
So for the benefit of those who haven't heard that episode yet, A, could you build on it? And B, would you agree with my description of what a college is and my relative weighting for each of the three?
Sure. So first of all, the uni experience is what you get when you run away from your parents and try to become an adult for the first time, right? that's how I would look at it. So essentially, what you're doing is that I think that's a very valid way. It's like net practice before you get out into the real world for a lot of people. And I think that the uni experience comes as a wonderful little period in everybody's life. Even for these guys, they'll have a little bit of it, but that is extremely crucial for you to build on your Starbucks and your everything else that you mentioned in your blog post. By the way, I completely agree with your blog post, except for one thing. And I feel that typically in a uni experience, there is a network and there's also a community. And there's a difference between a network and a community. So normally, if I'm a student, then my seniors and my juniors will form a community, which is like a sense of opportunity, sure, but there's also a sense of belonging. And if I look at like 10 years before and 10 years later and all of that, then it kind of becomes a network wherein the sense of belonging, nahi milta hai, isse job milega, that's what we're thinking of. So I think that's probably the only quibble I have with the whole thing. And probably I would change a Starbucks to a Vaishali. But yeah, it's absolutely okay.
So 100% agreed. Now I wish I could go back and call it. The problem with calling it Vaishali or Rupali is it makes sense to anybody from Pune, but not necessarily from the rest of the country. But I completely agree with you. And in fact, I think I will go back and edit that post because community is a much more powerful word than
it is, because
anything.
You get that vibe, right? Emotionally, we are connected by our limbic system rather than our prefrontal cortex to the thing. There is a lot of emotion. So you are kind of breaking through a lot of barriers when you meet somebody like that in real life. It's just a super, it's like goes through like a knife through butter, maybe.
And the kind of friends you make in college, I don't think you ever make again in life. I don't know what it is about that age, but
no, it's absolutely true. You kind of, I think that probably not even childhood, because in childhood, in fact, some of the friends that we make in childhood, when we grow up, we kind of grow out of that relationship because, some people remain dumb, some people are extra smart, some people have different likes and dislikes. But I think this is such a crucial time wherein, you can form these relationships that can last you throughout your life. And that's the beauty of it.
So one theme that runs through this entire series is, of course, the name itself is Back to College. So if you got the chance to go back to college whenever it is that you did college, what would you do differently? And second, if you somehow got the chance to get into college today, knowing what you do now, what would you do differently? Now, particularly with the... Sorry.
No,
good.
Sorry.
That's okay. So the question was, especially in the last 2 years, and as you mentioned in your podcast, maybe for the next 2 years also, if students don't get a chance to come on campus or only come on campus in a very restricted sense, this community thing that we are both talking about and so obviously in love with, how would you have tried to build this community if you lived in this dystopian online world?
Yeah, that's a very, very good question because there is so what happens? See, like a teacher has had to move from becoming being a theater artist to a film artist. Is what I feel, and probably Zoom has become the most expensive Netflix for anybody. So that's how I'm seeing this dystopian world. I mean, these are two things, and for students, I think that the crucial aspect is that the sense of community typically comes from the face-to-face close interactions, wherein you're having that cigarette with that person, or you're working out with that person, or you're you have a romantic relationship, and yet you're in the classroom, and yet you have friends and you have enemies, and there's the placement season, and there's the the bonding season. All of that is happening, and that is a very visceral sort of experience. Now that experience hardly ever gets replicated in digital. I mean, I teach digital subjects, but the fact is that because everything has become digital, I really think I should start focusing on the physicality of it all. It's really, because community, for anybody who's part of this thing, this community called college or the university or whatever you want to call it. I think if I take a step back, there are many kinds of communities. One is a collaborate and evaporate sort of community. The second community can be interest based. The third can be passion based. The fourth can be completely online, like Goodreads or something on Amazon. The fifth, and which is why it's very special, is this physical community. And you have the Rotary Club of Pune West also, which is a physical community. But by that time, people are jaded and are looking. It's more like a network rather than a community at that point.
Correct.
But as far as colleges are concerned, I think that is where the core aspect comes through, that experience of actually meeting somebody in flesh and blood. Now, how do you recreate it digitally? That was your question, I suppose.
Yes.
I don't think we should try to. The thing is that the moment we try to do that, it becomes lame. You see, those Zoom parties were lame, and that's why they didn't work. The fact is that what we should do is we should say, okay, this is life, and we need to build a different kind of community structure rather than trying to replicate what was there online. And I think that is where a lot of educationalists are getting it wrong. With good intentions, we get in to try and recreate the physical community, in a digital format. That's never going to happen.
That's so I was just about to say, in fact, I wish
a percentage, by the way. you students, come on, you can have more than 100%.
So it's, well, agreed on both counts. First for the 10,000%, but second, I wish we had this call earlier this year, because we had organized the world's most lame-ass freshers party for the juniors in this batch. It was online, and it sucked. There's no other way to put it.
No, it's see, the intention is good, but if I was trying to have a party, I won't. I just won't, because I mean, come on, man. We are talking to students who are already probably way smarter than what we were at that age, right? Secondly, they don't give a shit about our parties or the way in which we conceive of parties, right? So, and then you are trying to put it on digital. Oh God help you.
Red card twice over, yeah, agreed. Okay, before we okay, you've spoken about how online communities don't work and we shouldn't even try. But should then...
So they work, but in a different way.
In a different way.
You can't, replicate what was there. That's what I mean.
Fair enough. So when you try to recreate the physical world online, it's never going to work because there are important differences. Absolutely. What about the flip side of this question? What is unique, special, and worthy about an online community that we can try and foster?
Oh, 100%. So, and I think safety, actually very weirdly, and anonymity can happen in online community. The second thing is I can be my best self. I can be my Instagram left side profile, right side profile. So all of that shit will happen, right? So an online community also has advantages in the sense that I can probably be Batman when I'm not Batman in real life. So I think that probably is closest to the truth. And then I might want to live up to being Batman in real life as well, and maybe go out and do some workout or get some additional skills or polish the way in which I'm coming across to people and stuff like that. I might want to live up to that self-image that I'm projecting on any online community. So that's an advantage. There has been some data from Tinder, which actually talks about this. There was a study on Tinder saying that, I think it was famously Jordan Peterson who said that, or somebody like that, who said that people who were actually meeting on Tinder are losing out on something, because you're losing out on the awkwardness of the interaction that you happen to have when you're meeting or you're asking out somebody in real life, because
that was my area of specialization when I was single, the awkwardness part.
So the rejection and the learning from it and the ability to groom yourself a little better and become, a more acceptable member of society is crucial. And I really appreciate that. I appreciated that, because, this swipe left and swipe right is not something which is particularly, it's damn easy actually.
Yeah.
But then there was some other pieces of data that came through saying that Tinder is actually fostering you to try and be better when you actually meet that person in real life. And so that has become a bit of a self-navigating compass. I don't know.
That's fascinating. So it's fascinating on two accounts. One, every college has these, I don't know what they call them, too old-fashioned. Maybe one of the students can help us out, unless, Siddhart, you know what they're called. Those anonymous pages where you're free to comment without anybody knowing. Every college has one, so I'm sure one of the students will comment and let us know what they're called. But basically, there are forums where you can say whatever you want to without anybody knowing who you are. So you can declare that you have a crush on X, you can complain about a prof, whatever it may be. Safe and secure, that you will never be personally identified.
It's called a WhatsApp group.
Confession pages, yes. Thank you so much. Confession. No, WhatsApp groups are not anonymous. You know who it is.
Yeah.
But yes, confessions pages. Thank you.
Yeah.
And yes, of course, as it turns out, Gokhale also has one. Now, maybe what I'm thinking is it might be a good way to conduct a class. Have a Google Doc session where you sign in anonymously, and that way you are perhaps able to ask questions that you would not have been able to face to face. So you can say to the teacher, "Gali galoch bhi ho sakta hai," perhaps at the extreme edges.
Yeah.
But students might be that much more willing to ask and argue, which maybe they wouldn't have in the real world. It's one thing worth thinking about. Maybe I'll try it the next time I teach a class.
It's a very, very interesting idea. However, I think that, only an interesting professor who is loved by students will think of an idea like this. So a mediocre professor is never going to think like that. Right? So, never going to happen.
It won't scale, yeah.
Never going to happen. And the interesting professor doesn't need it. so most of the time.
Which actually is one of the reasons to get depressed about academia. I think we're all too hidebound and not interested in changing college.
Oh, yeah.
So speaking about changing college, there was another podcast episode on your podcast about professors being content creators. And professors being judged for being content creators rather than being judged for being professors, which was awesome. That's 100% my approach and attitude to teaching. My job is to create content and point out to people where awesome content is to be found. And then it's up to them to go and take a look at it. And what are we failing in as academia? Why is this not happening more? Are we recruiting the wrong kind of people? Are we not allowing students' voices to bubble up enough for this change to happen? Where are we going wrong?
I think it's a great question. There are 2 or 3 levels where we might be going wrong. First is more than half of the Janta, professor-wise, who joins any college is joining for the research rather than the teaching. And therefore they are actually joining, so the teaching aspect is always secondary. Now, sometimes they might still be great teachers, but most of the times they are not. Second problem is that whenever you're looking at any sort of interaction that we are having with students, we are always confined to the student should respect me because I'm a teacher. Now that is baggage coming from the past. And I think that should be shot down, because let's understand, why should a student respect you? Because you've got great content. right? Otherwise, why should a student respect you? I mean, because you've done your PhD, or because, what exactly is a student supposed to respect you for? In a world full of information symmetry, wherein you have so much of information coming at you through YouTube and through Quora and Reddit and whatever else, right? You are now in a situation wherein you can't really say, I demand that sort of respect or something like that. You create your content, brother, and if it works well, then people will start respecting. And, then people will respect you more. And then you could have a conversation which is more mentoring or coaching driven, which is every educator's sort of dream. But that comes later. That's step 2. I don't know. That's what I feel.
No, I completely 100% agree with you, but I can't help but be frustrated how slowly we are seeing this change happen. One thing, so Daniel Kahneman, and I keep pointing this out to anybody who I want to speak to about academia, he had a lovely point where in Israeli universities, you were required to address your professors by their first name. So I would be Ashish and you would be Sid or Siddhart.
Correct.
There was no option. In fact, it was mandated. And that informality itself helps students be a little more assertive when speaking to their profs. It's very difficult for you to say, Professor, you're wrong. It's slightly easier for people to say, Ashish, you are wrong. But even that change in culture is so difficult to get back. And I've been telling these students, for example, to call me Ashish. Maybe 2 out of 100 call me Ashish, and that's me. So other professors, to matlab chance hi nahi hai.
Yeah.
How do you tweak that culture? How do you will it guarantee change over time, or can we do anything to be catalyst of change?
Okay. So I think maybe we can if we try to solve the right problem of them having a different kind of equation with us, then they could call me Lord of the Jungle for all I care. The fact is, in India, instead of trying to change the culture completely, people call me Sid, sir. Okay, so that's a pretty interesting way of looking at it. Or some people call it Prof. Prof is also nice.
Right.
So it's interesting, and I used to feel as aggrieved as you when I started teaching. I used to say, call me that, Sid, all fine. I'm still going to grade you on F's and D's, so it's okay. So the fact is that over a period of time, I realized that it is probably not going to happen in the next 10 to 20 years, unless and until you are maybe in that ISB Hyderabad or whatever, right? The fact is that in MICA, a lot of people call our president, MICA president and director, President Sir. Now just think about it. If people who are grown-up human beings are, because of the cultural background, calling people President Sir. So, it's like President is the name. Now I'm adding one more sobriquet to it. So it's quite a funny thing. So I don't think students are going to change.
Not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
Right. One can dream, but yeah, I agree. I don't think it's going to change. Okay, I'm going to keep segueing across a whole variety of topics. One thing that I wanted to speak to you about, and in fact, the student who helped me prepare the research for this call was very interested in hearing your answer. You've spoken about how you worked on Sony's foray into cricket programming.
Yeah.
So I am of the age where I remember Charu Sharma and Mandira Bedi hosting the 2003 World Cup, which I think was on Sony. But you're speaking of this having happened about 7 years earlier, 96.
Yeah. 97, maybe 97. Okay, yeah, but sure, 97.
Around that time.
Yeah.
So, 2 questions. One, could you explain what the landscape was like back then? What cricket programming really meant for a nation that was starved of anything pertaining to quality when it came to cricket programming? Number 1. And second, how did what you learned help or hinder you in doing this job?
Sure. So, firstly, and I was in charge of actually creating an unofficial cricket match. At that point in time, because it was not an official. So I had Indians versus Sri Lankans. Okay. And right from organizing the ambulance and booking Wankhede Stadium and making sure that, the fire engines are ready, and actually talking to Azharuddin and his manager / fixer and Arjuna Ranatunga. Oh God, that was interesting. That was so interesting, and such intelligent people. I mean, Azhar is was a very intelligent guy. And I had to actually tell them to play the match as if it's not a festival match. So I had to actually say, don't fix this. please play this seriously. Because what Sony was trying to do was get into the stranglehold that maybe Star had,
and ESPN had.
ESPN Star maybe had not even combined that. My memory might be, but
no, they
anyway,
hadn't. You're right. They had it correct.
So it was Star and BCCI, and Sony was the outsider, and we were trying to figure out how the hell do we position ourselves when it's an unofficial match. And you know what the worst thing was? The worst thing was that the match was not even live. It was, I think, 5 minutes delayed. So I invented a new word called delayed live. Now that is like 10,000%. That was really funny. So yeah, it was a hair-raising experience, to be honest. It was quite a amazing trip, because the amount you learn when you're trying to manage a project like that, which is high profile, a first for the company, because I think at that point in time, Sony Entertainment was a startup. I mean, our other programs were Jaiveer, Hanuman, and I Dream of Genie and the Three Stooges. So it was quite interesting. So this was a breakthrough thing for us. Yeah, so what I learned from MICA, absolutely nothing. I had to I had to literally learn everything that I had to on the fly over there. It was in event management, which wasn't particularly taught at MICA at that point in time. Yeah, so I'm being blunt. I don't think I got more educated in my second job at AT&T in the art and science of marketing communications, much more than what I learned at MICA. And not because MICA had bad professors, they had excellent professors, but perhaps my style of learning was different.
Same pinch as I used to say when I was a child. I learned much more drinking with a couple of my professors than I did in classrooms, number one. And number two, I learned much better like you did when I had skin in the game, and you have to do a project and you have no choice, but then you're going to learn. So other than that, college was basically just mugging up one day before the exam and jo hoga dekha jayega, which fortunately turned out well, but there was no plan. But the question, three questions really. So first question about this is, did this process help you become a better teacher when you have the realization that what you learned was useless? Does that realization help you become a better professor?
No. So, okay. So here's the deal, right? I'm not saying that all of what I learned in MICA was useless. There were some excellent professors who, the likes of who I never see. There was a guy called Jagdish Shokar from IIM Ahmedabad. At that point in time, MICA was a fledgling. So MICA was also a startup. So in the sense, we had people from IIM and NID who used to come and teach. So that was the creator, whatever style of teaching over there. So what we had was professors who could really blow your mind and make you ignited about a subject that you never would have thought it would. So Professor Chokhar was teaching organizational behavior, which I never thought I'm going to be remotely interested in. But I just understood the power of a fantastic teacher. And so therefore, that perhaps was the biggest inspiration for me, because I think students should connect to teachers who create great content and not the subject. So I might be having a very controversial point of view on this. But I think that if you talk to any, I don't know what the average age over here in your class is, Gen Z or millennials?
Around 19 to 20.
Gen Zers. So Gen Zers are still better than millennials, by the way. I'm just trying to get the crowd on my side. But, but the fact is, if I look at millennials, a lot of them say that they're confused because they think that that there's a certain subject that they want to learn, and then they realize that the subject is not. I learned that pretty quickly, that a great professor can make you interested in absolutely anything. And so that really sparked my interest. Is there something that I can do and become a nice professor, and communicate my passion for a subject as a secondary thing? So I think that's what it was.
And second, if you got a magic time machine and somehow got the ability to go back to MICA after having worked on the delayed life project, would you have changed anything in your approach to learn better?
So if I have to go back to MICA to learn something and go back again and do the Sony thing.
Yeah.
How to get out of a project before it starts.
Wise words, wise words.
Yeah, and I guess I would have learned to be more political, and because when I joined MICA, I was a cricketer in disguise, right? I was trying to get selected for Maharashtra, and pretty serious about cricket. So I never sat for too many lectures. So
Right.
I was on the other side of the fence, Ashish, that you probably were sitting on. So I was 12th, till 12th standard, I was in Ferguson. Then I went to BMCC. So I skipped Gokhale. So I went from Ferguson to...
And then taught at IMDS. So.
And then came back to IMDS. So again, maybe you if ever I come to Gokhale and we have a chai at your lovely canteen, then maybe the thing will be complete. But
tick all the boxes.
Yeah, when we're coming back, I think that the most important thing for me was to really learn the stamina of being in class. So I'm probably the oldest person alive to have a shortened attention span because everybody, and that helped me connect with students because I know how they think.
So I'm like you, I bunked as much as possible. I hate sitting and listening in class. It's ironical that the two of us are saying this. But passive listening, I just don't, it's a horrible way to learn. As far as I'm concerned, I mean, horses for courses, but mujhse nahi hota, it just doesn't work out.
I can see so many students silently judging the two of us right now, but...
Hypocrites, yes.
But basically professors love the voice, sound of their own voice. I mean, that's for certain. But the fact is that if I look at why I became a teacher, it is directly connected to the few teachers who inspired me. I mean, looping back to the original question that you had.
Yeah. So looping back to that original question, based on your first cricket project, where you spoke about how everything had to be done by you. So whether it was ambulances, fire engines, I suppose lighting in the Wankhede, speaking to Azerbaijan and so on and so forth. Yeah. You have another episode where you speak about project management and which skill is better, waterfall or agile.
Yeah.
When students work on projects in classes, so right now what I try to do is, my responsibility is not so much teaching these guys, but helping them start projects and those projects outlive them. So when they graduate, the project should still continue.
Yeah.
So very basic bare bones approach to project management. I know nothing about project management. I've never studied it formally. But what tips would you give to people who are ages 18, 19 and 20 about how to execute projects better? What project management skills should you definitely know no matter what your age in life?
Okay. This is such a deep question. I'm going to go on a rant, so please bear with me.
All the time in the world.
Okay. So if I look at project management, first of all, I have a very, very singularly different view on project management. So first of all, decide if you're a tailor or if you're Armani. Okay.
I get that.
Yeah, I'll explain. So if you're a tailor, right, and a customer comes to you, the tailor will say, what do you want? What kind of clothes do you want? Okay, this is the pant you want, this is the fit, this is the length, etc., etc. So he's taking your requirements, right? And then he's converting that into some sort of delivery at hopefully a reasonable time and at a reasonable cost. But if you go to an Armani, he says, I know who you are and I've got a vision for you. Okay, so the starting point is different. The tailor asks you what you want and Armani tells you what you need. Okay, or what you should have. Now, over here, it's a philosophical difference. And one of them leads to a certain kind of project management, which is waterfall, which is essentially, I know all the requirements, you shut up and go back home and I'll create a beautiful suit for you. Okay, and I have the vision and I'm very strong at it. Okay, because I'm really good. And there are some people who are really good. Steve Jobs was fantastic at it. So was Armani, whoever. And then you move in a cascading way, and which is why it's called waterfall.
Yeah.
And if I look at iterative, or all the wonderful methodologies called iterative and Scrum and this and that and the other, which are methodologies within the iterative branch, they are about trial and error. So I try something and I show it, and then the client slaps me in the face, then I go back and then do something else, and then I go back again and stuff like that. So both are very valid approaches as philosophies. One is a bottom-up philosophy, one is a top-down philosophy. But I think the most important thing for any would-be project manager is to know who that person is, who you are. And who you are also might change from context to context. Now, you and I might may know a lot more on maybe cricket, or you, in your case, economics, or in my case, marketing or business management or whatever. But we might know jack shit about quantum physics. So if it's quantum physics, I'm certainly going to go the iterative way. But if it's marketing, probably I'm going to go the waterfall way. So I would say that is the best piece of advice that I can give to a project manager. It's not a task on a sheet. It is about how you're going to energize yourself and other people, but doing it in a manner that becomes rational and logical. So I would put it that way.
But it's way easier said than done, right? I mean, I can't, 100%. I fail at it now, so I can't imagine even telling a 19-year-old that this is the way to. There is not a
single project in the world which has been completed to time, quality, cost, and scope. So, I don't think that you should feel very bad. But it's interesting. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I interrupted you.
No. So I was just about to say, perhaps one of the most important lessons we can give them is that you are going to fail. In fact, failing is what is going to help you become a better project manager the next time you build upon a project. Yeah. How do you communicate that importance of failure to students? How do you help them embrace the notion that they are going to fail and that's a good thing?
I think Mike Tyson had a wonderful statement, no? He said, everybody has a plan till they're punched in the face. I love it. Mike Tyson, the philosopher, man.
Yogi Berra and then Mike Tyson, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but let's think about it. It is so true, that statement. Yeah. And you might have all the elaborate plans in the world, but if you're punched in the face, that jolt that you get, and the the immediate responses that you have, and the whole thing is so, you're acting punch drunk. The fact is that I think that failing, everyone says fail fast and all of that, so I'm not getting into those tropes. But what I would certainly say is, if there is any methodology that has really impressed me, it is the customer development methodology, which was really radical, which is not only iterative or waterfall, but it was based on the fact that don't build a product first, sell to a customer first. And therefore, it just completely turned project management on its head. And that was absolutely superb for me, because that's helped me a lot. So that helps you fail, because when you go to a customer and try to sell something which you haven't got, you will learn so much more, and then you'll use your business model canvas, and then you'll use all of the stuff that you think you have, and you learn so much more by making first contact with the marketplace. So that's where you're getting punched in the face actually comes through. So I think a lot of times what tends to happen is project managers, whether they're students or professionals, want to hide in a corner and build that product and then showcase it to the market, which I think in essence may be wrong, especially in a place where everything's going at hyper speed. So
actually I have a real life example, and maybe you can tell me if I'm on the right path with where I'm going with this. But to use a not at all hypothetical example, I and some of the students on this call, we are trying to build out a placement website for Gokhale Institute.
Okay.
So there are two ways to do it. One way is to see, okay, these are the tools we have or can purchase. What is the best that we can do? Or the other way is to ask, what will a recruiter want to see from this website?
Yes.
The second approach is what you're referring to as the customer. I'm sorry, I forgot.
I would go one step further. I would go to a recruiter and say, why don't you come to us for place? You're selling, not researching. So when you're selling, essentially what you're doing is, why don't you come to the Gokhale School of Economics and recruit our people? So what do you have? What is the information? So then that guy is going to ask you some set of questions, and then you're going to get those kind of inputs for your placement process and your website. They're going to be very, very different from anything else that you may have imagined.
So getting that punch in the face from the recruiter is step number one.
Yes. Unfortunately, yes. Unless you're Armani, then everything is forgiven.
No. I've been called a lot of things. Armani is not one of them. But fair enough. Okay. So a couple of questions about your podcast, and then we'll get back to the development here. One was about, and I love this episode, was about faffing in presentations. So rather than spoil it for students if they haven't heard that episode, one, how do you cut down the faff? And second, one thing I loved, I don't remember now whether it was or something else, the importance of building out a narrative in a presentation. You're really telling a story when you're presenting, but people don't do that. People read out from the slide, people make it a very disjoint experience. Based on your experience of having taught students and listened to more than your fair share of ugly presentations, how should students learn to tell a story while presenting?
So I've got a very weird method, and the method is don't open PowerPoint at all.
Yeah.
Okay, write your story on Word or just narrate your story on voice note or something like that. Because that way you will own the narrative of what you're trying to say. You will connect the dots between the data that you're trying to present. And basically, any presentation exists to persuade somebody else, to actually make a shift in their attitude or their behavior so that you actually come out with some more value than what you've entered into the presentation for. So what I've noticed is that if you start making a presentation, you start letting the presentation itself become the hero rather than you. And you have to actually own the presentation, not the PowerPoint. So therefore, write a story first. Okay, now this is a very weird thing, and I've made a video of it, which is on Instagram, as well as I made a podcast of it, because I think you cannot overlearn this. So if you make a document, you write a story. This is how the story is. This is the hero archetype, whatever myth. Jo kuch bhi hai, aapka story hai. Once you write the story, you underline keywords. Okay. Now that may be a combination of data or phrases or just words or pictures or whatever. If you after step 2 is done, you just put those on a PowerPoint and say the same story through those keywords, because the guy is not going to pay attention to your PowerPoint, right? So then you own the story. You're never going to say, I will read out from this slide. You'll see the keyword, it will trigger some thought process in you, and you will, kind of make that story happen. So that's how I would. By the way, I never do PowerPoints, even in my classes.
You mentioned that, yes.
I can't. I just can't, because there is death by PowerPoint.
Oh, absolutely.
So, but if I have to, this is the way in which I'll do it.
No, fair enough. So, in fact, in my notes for this podcast, I had a question about the Amazon approach. So, as you might know, Amazon forces you to write down rather than use.
It's a great
presentations.
It's a great approach. I genuinely think that the amount of, not just that, but they spend every first 10 minutes reading that document.
Reading, yes, exactly.
And that is so beautiful, because you can waste so much of bullshit and time on just arguing things. People should just calm down and read a document. And it actually takes, one of the things Ashish have begun doing is taking a cue from Amazon. I experimented this in class. I understood that students don't like reading case studies.
Yeah.
I donated 20 minutes of my lecture time. And that's precious time. Because if it's 45 minutes or 1 hour or whatever, 20 minutes, you read the case study, and then let's talk. Because whatever time the discussion is, it still is much richer. And at least I know that they're reading, and it still becomes a better conversation. So I just experimented with it last year and this year, and I think it's worked. Both times on Zoom too, not in classrooms.
Oh, so not even in physical classroom. Nice. Okay. Chalo, next semester. I'm teaching some of these guys a course next semester.
I don't know. It may be contextual. Don't kill me if it doesn't work.
No, I'll just give the students your email address and phone number. I'll outsource the killing. Okay, so one was the power of narrative, and you had another episode which unfortunately I did not have time to listen to, where you spoke about distributed presentations.
Oh, yeah.
Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please?
Yeah. So
I'm sorry, I haven't heard the episode. So it's more for me than.
No, it's absolutely okay. What I've noticed is that students, whenever you give them a presentation to do, they distribute the work. तू टारगेट ऑडियंस लेगा, तू ये लेगा, फिर हम कट पेस्ट करेगा, एक तो विजुअल्स डालेगा, फिर चकाचक प्रेजेंटेशन हो जाएगा, right? So that is the attitude. Now the poor professor doesn't know this, right? Or this is not terribly aware of the intricacies. But the fact is that this is how the presentation becomes in silos, and then it's stuck up together. I call it a distributed presentation because it is actually distributed. Work is distributed. So therefore, there is no hope for a narrative. And what is the interesting thing is that I was the client when I was listening to an agency make a pitch. So there was one person in Dubai, a couple of people in Bangalore who were making a pitch. And I realized that the same bad habit had been there even when they were professionals, and they didn't know what each other was talking about. Oh no, he's going to take this part and then he will take this part. So then immediately as a client, I'm realizing that, okay, these are not the people I want to go with, so that is a crucial lesson which I think people should understand, that if you're going to distribute work and call it teamwork, that is not teamwork.
Is there any way, and this is more for me than for the students, is there any way to make sure this does not happen? Do you have any tips or tricks for making sure that the distributed presentation is shot in the foot before it becomes a monster?
So normally what I tell my students is that I don't care if 5 people present or 1 person presents. Choose your best presenter. Okay, and that relieves a lot of pressure. And then secondly, if I'm looking at who's contributing what, I think the distribution of work potentially is something that that's something that maybe a professor can have a conversation about. So who's going to do the research? How are you going to have a conversation about this? Because this has not been taught.
Yeah.
So what we expect is, chalo presentation karo, and then people go off and then say, okay, so then their logic also is true, no? So okay, tu ye kar, main karunga, baad mein milenge. So that's not going to work. So I don't think anybody's actually taught people the ability to work as a team. I think there was somebody who just asked that question.
What is teamwork? Yeah.
What is teamwork is actually, when you're given a problem, don't take the problem for what it is, but you reframe the problem, understand the problem as a team, and then make something out of it. Then say, okay, so what am I going to do? So it is a lot more effort than what people actually understand it to be. But trust me, it is the most fulfilling that you can, fulfilling feeling that you can ever have if you make a fantastic presentation. And when I say presentation, I do not mean PowerPoint.
PPT, yeah.
You can dance if you want.
And I agree. So I'm an economist. The definition that I use when I'm telling students about presentation is it's a complement. It's not a substitute. The presentation is not there in your place.
Yeah, exactly.
You're just using it as a tool to help tell a better story. But
no, you're absolutely. It is a complement. It is something that you should be able to actually go with your presentation even if the PowerPoint fails without a hitch. And I think those are the best presentations, because then the guy who's listening says, oh shit, this guy really knows this stuff, and he's calm under pressure. So many different things happen.
Yep. Okay. Last question about, I'm sure you're sick and tired of hearing about episodes from your podcast.
No, it's okay. It's fun. I have forgotten most of the podcasts that I've made. The eternal sunshine of the spotless mind.
More people should watch Danny Boyle movies. So for those of you who haven't seen Eternal Sunshine, please, it's a depressing movie, but wonderfully made.
It is not depressing if you've got the Eternal Sunshine.
Oh, fair enough. So question was, you had a podcast about statement of purpose. And my takeaway from that episode was that writing a statement of purpose should in fact be happening whether or not you submit it. And it should be an intensely uncomfortable experience for you. Writing it should make you painfully aware of how much time you're wasting in your own life. And
absolutely.
In fact, for that reason, would never want to write one. Because time I'm wasting. Bring up this question because a lot of these people are going to start writing SOPs in the next year or so.
Well, yeah.
So I'm not asking about how to write a good SOP, but could you, for the students, elaborate upon what an honest SOP is, and why my takeaway is, if you agree with me, correct, that it should be a painful experience.
I think your statement of purpose, if you read it every day in the morning, it should serve the purpose of inspiring you. And that is why you should write it. then it's honest. If it's inspiring you. I think for anybody who's not seen Jerry Maguire film that has Tom Cruise in a rare, nice role, which actually showcases this statement of purpose really well. And it is an amazing thing to have, because you're completely, when you read that statement, you should come alive. That is the best way I can explain it. It's a feeling. It's not a thought process. It's a feeling. You read that statement every morning and you come alive. You're fired up, and not in the self-help Tony Robbins kind of way, but it means something. It has a personal meaning for you. So if you write that, and if you know that, see, as an interviewer, I've been part of so many panels, and I'm sure you have been part of many panels. You can figure out, you can smell the bullshit.
Yeah.
So
the 2 साल IT और उसके बाद MBA crowd is just the most depressing. I'm sorry, but I mean, it's truly depressing.
It is.
And the reason it's painful is not because I'm not commenting about the candidate, but it's like a factory assembly line. कि इसके बाद ये करना है, इसके बाद ये करना है, इसके बाद ये करना है. But there's no thought of whether it resonates with what you want to do, whether it's what your innermost dreams and passions are.
Yeah.
About. So
there is so much to. I mean, I can gab on about planning and stuff like that, because I genuinely think that most people actually don't understand planning at all in that sense. But coming back to your original thing, I think statement of purpose, you should judge your statement of purpose by how it makes you feel rather than what it makes you think.
That's a worthy point. And I won't share it with anybody, but I do plan to write my statement of purpose after having listened to your episode.
I actually write it. I write my statement of purpose. I revisit it. I edit it, and I think that I have always been benefited by it. 100%. And you can make it not non-bullshitty. You don't need to make it grand. It could be very simple and stupid. Its purpose is to make you alive.
Yep. Okay, since you've spoken about how you're still not bored to death yet with my questions about your podcast episodes.
Yeah, you can go for it.
So I haven't read this book myself. I've made a note of it. It's on my infinitely long to-read list. But Nir Eyal's book, Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products.
Yes.
Could you speak, and I haven't listened once again to the episodes, my apologies, but could you elaborate a little bit about what this book is about and why perhaps I or anybody else should read it?
I think, so I think Nir Eyal has written a very interesting book wherein he explains the phenomenon behind Facebook or behind Netflix or behind Instagram, and why we remain hooked to these sort of offerings from Silicon Valley. Okay, some of them. And what he's talking about is that it's a 4-step framework. There's a trigger, which may be external or internal, which leads to an immediate action from the recipient, which is not having too much of thought, which leads to a variable reward. Today you might get 200 likes. Yesterday you only had 100 likes. So then you thought, मेरा lighting अच्छा नहीं था, ये photo अच्छा नहीं खींचता है, इसलिए मेरे को 100 likes मिला. Now today 200 likes. So that's your variableness of your reward, which then therefore incentivizes you to actually go and contribute back into the system, right? So, and that kind of completes the loop. So trigger, action, variable reward, and investment back into the system. So that is Nir Eyal's Hooked. Now I think he's done a good job, and I think it's a fantastic thing. So what I tend to do is I use books not as an ending point, but as a starting point for me to start thinking, right? I'm sure you do that too, right? So the fact is that when I looked at the Hooked framework, what I realized was that unwittingly, all of these social media or whatever have found a way in which they can hack into different parts of our brain beautifully. I'm saying unwittingly because I don't think anybody can actually do it from a knowledge-based perspective without actually understanding neurobiology to a large extent. But if I look at the way in which you had the action, people getting triggered to write back on Twitter or whatever, it is happening from a different part of your brain. So it's not the thinking slow part that Daniel Kahneman says. So how does that happen every single time? What is happening? So that becomes a fascinating place for research. And maybe, I'm very interested in looking at how we can look at this framework and kind of build and connect it to neurological or biological elements, and also economical elements, and incentivization maybe, or even so many different things. So that is hooked for you, and hooked can work as an individual. So you can study triggers, or you can study actions, or you can study incentives or rewards, or you can study the whole thing. So it's a fascinating framework. I don't know if I've done justice to it, but it is 7:30.
You certainly have. Yeah, I won't keep you for much longer. Don't worry.
No. This is not. This is just because if I have to prepare for a class, I would certainly look at drawing the diagram and explaining each thing, and really boring the crap out of my students for a while. But yeah, that's my pitch. Yeah.
And efforts are absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. So, one thing I wanted to make a note of, and I'll reach out to you separately after this call is over. Colin Kramerer is a neuroscientist and an economist who's got a couple of excellent videos on the neuroscience of shopping. I haven't read the book, but I'll share the video with you. And if you want to see if something can come out of,
I would yeah, anything in this area absolutely fascinates me. In the same token, what I would suggest, if you haven't watched it already, Robert Sapolsky's behavioral biology lectures, the Stanford.
Wow, I haven't.
Amazing, incredible.
Robert, who did you say?
Sapolsky, Sapolsky.
Got it. Okay, done. I'll make a note of it.
Yeah.
Okay, now, not just about your career specifically, but one thing that has been true for a very long time has been you've been prolific about putting content online. So the Small Joys Unlimited blog, which
damn, you saw that. Okay. I stand exposed then. Okay.
Or your Instagram page or your podcast. There's a world of material that you've put online. Was this a deliberate decision from a very early stage in your career, or is it something that you've grown into? And what are the pros and cons of putting yourself out there unrelentingly?
You know what, Ashish, this is a very, very interesting question, because I thought about it deeply. And I have always had an action bias. But the fact is that when I started, I have written a couple of books also. They're very bad books, do not read them. But I've written a couple of books.
The Gift of the Gap is one of them. I don't remember the other one.
The Gift of the Gap, The Map That Matters is my first book, which was published by some New York publishing house. I don't know how the hell they got on for it. But ठीक है. So गलती होती है सबसे थोड़ी गलती होती है. So I wrote a couple of books. Then what I did was that I wrote this Small Joys Unlimited, and then moved on to whatever. So Instagram, etc., etc. What I realized was, and this is very important, is that, and I'm sure you'll understand it as a podcast host, that we are never happy with what comes out.
Yeah, always, yes.
Yeah. But the fact is that most people actually stop themselves from producing just because of that fear. Because there is a difference in the taste in your head and what actually is executed by you. So you feel ashamed because you are not living up to your own lofty standards. So I decided to give up the ghost on that. And I said that the first thing that I do is break that barrier. And that was something that actually helped me be productive in terms of content creation. And that actually, funnily, is the only way in which you improve. No, not by having thoughts in your head. It's like that How I Met Your Mother episode wherein, 4 friends meet and say, dude, we should start a bar. So, those conversations have happened to all of us.
Exactly, yeah.
Those never leave the bar. they remain in the bar.
Yep. You have another, either a write-up or an episode, I don't remember, where you speak about showing up regularly, quantity over quality, and eventually over time you'll get better. Yeah. So for me, it's a punishing schedule, given everything else I do to write on EFE every day, but it's tiring, it's sometimes frustrating, and I myself am very unhappy with some of the posts I've written, but just showing up regularly matters.
It does. I think I learned a lot from Jeffrey Archer, who has a very punishing schedule as a writer, and he just sticks to the routine because he believes that he's not going to write his best every day. Not that I like Jeffrey Archer too much. Okay, a lot of the books. Okay, so but I'm just looking at his routine. Okay, and
Exactly. Yeah.
he wakes up, he does, and he has a routine, and that really struck me, because if you're going to have a routine, and if you relieve yourself of the fact that you're not going to be Sachin Tendulkar and hit a couple of hundreds every, even he makes a 30 year or made a 30 and got out. So there are going to be days like that, but your routine is what matters. I think that is absolutely critical. Absolutely critical.
Hopefully, some of the students take inspiration, and whatever it is, it could be Instagram post, it could be YouTube.
This might help your students, right? This might help any student. Right? So the fact is that the reason why we find it so painful to stick to a routine is because we are not being ourselves. So
could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. So the fact is that suppose you're doing your podcast. We are doing this podcast, right? Or you're teaching, or you're writing. You are without trappings, which is why you are productive. The moment you put trappings, so that you have to live up to a certain self-image, or you have to be a certain way, or you have to go through a certain thing, or my girlfriend has to like it, or whatever the hell, then those are things which actually are baggage, which build so much of cognitive overload that you get, वो जो क्या आम का अचार हो जाता है, whatever that statement is, which I'm sure I'm butchering, but that's what happens. My feeling is that if you just get rid of that cognitive overload from your head, and just be as genuinely yourself as possible when you're doing these activities, accepting that you are a failure when you're doing it, I think that is very, very liberating.
Fair enough. Right. One last question from me, and then hopefully the students will have some questions. And let me know if you're running short on time.
I'm good. Absolutely.
Okay. It's a weird question to end with, but why is the podcast called The Traveling Professor? Is it because of the itinerant nature of the number of colleges you teach at?
The podcast is called The Traveling Professor's Diary. I am the traveling professor because I travel from institute to institute. Okay, so I travel from institute to, and I teach in the UK and the US whenever I get a chance. So I'm actually doing that, right? The fact is that it's the diary, because what I realized was that the most amazing conversations that happen with the professor are outside of class. And so it is when you go to a canteen and meet up with the students. So I'm trying to capture the essence of that conversation with students after a class is over, and you're having a chai and a sutta in a canteen. And so that's the mahal. Even when the professor is relaxed and the student is a little chilled out, and it's a little better atmosphere, and something has happened, and the student may be asking a question or saying, hey, I didn't really agree with you in this particular thing, or the professor saying, maybe I didn't explain it well, or whatever, guards are down. That was the ethos behind The Traveling Professor's Diary.
Brilliant. I can't think of a better note to end my list of questions, especially on a evening. On a Monday, that too, with all the madness that is going on. For making the time, Siddhart. Seriously, honestly, I can't thank you enough.
No, it's absolutely okay. This has been absolute fun for me. I always wanted to meet up with you, and I've admired your work. I've admired the fact that you're connecting with students in a very different way. I loved your podcast and I love your writing. So I just wanted to have any chance of talking with you. So, here we are.
Once the madness ends, as much beer as you can drink on me, accompanied with whatever food is going to catch your fancy. But if students have questions, and I'm really hoping that they do, please.
Sure, anytime. Yeah.
Bring them on.
There is comments, but I don't think.
Yeah. Although I'm really hoping at least a couple of questions. I'm forcing myself to stop, so I can't imagine why anybody.
It's all right. I think people are maybe tired of.
They've had too much of online session. Yeah. We'll give them a couple of minutes just in case somebody's typing.
Sure. Not a problem. Not a problem.
So while we're waiting, do you by any chance know Sumedh Nathu?
Name sounds very familiar. Why is it sounding familiar? But
Milinda Nathu stays very close to where you stay. She's an art critic based in Pune. Her son is Sumedh Nathu. He was a student at SIMC Viman Nagar.
Really? Okay. So our ships may have just sailed in the night without connecting to each other. I think there's somebody who's brave enough to ask a question.
Yes, I know. God bless Shashank. His question is doing enough tailoring one of the ways to become an Arman?
Okay. Excellent question, Shashank. Now I don't know if you like cricket, but by being more of Rahul Dravid, you're never going to be a Sehwag. So if you practice being a Rahul Dravid, you're going to be a better Rahul Dravid, right? Unless and until you're in that cred ad wherein he goes smashing things. But let's not get there. Now, so you get my point, Shashank. The fact is that if you want to be a Sehwag, you've got to be a Sehwag. And that actually is a question of being courageous and having a different kind of attitude. And I'm not praising one over the other. I think both have their own qualities and stuff like that. And in fact, both have praised each other amazingly as cricketers. But the fact is that doing tailoring is not going to make you an Armani. Having the balls to actually be an Armani is going to make you an Armani.
Although I must tell you, so I use the Dravid Sehwag example when I'm teaching statistics and I'm talking about variance and consistency. And you'll identify with the Siddhart because this happened just last year at a college where I was teaching again an undergrad course. One of the students said, "Oh, you mean to say Pujara and Sharma?" Are examples?
Yeah, well, there you go. We're old, man.
I know. Painful, you. That was such a horrible moment for me.
But to be honest, I like Sharma. He's supremely talented.
Oh, amazing.
I think Pujara has got all the Wall's qualities, but perhaps not so much of his technique.
Agreed. A little too bottom-handed for my taste as a number 3.
Correct.
Yeah, agreed.
You know, since we are so good in cricket.
It's our birthright. And especially you and I, we've grown up watching the Indian cricket team in the 90s. I mean,
and plus Punekars. So that is...
And plus. Yes. So born experts in everything.
Born experts in everything. So I think we should be happy with that one question, man. It was a good question, though. It was a good question.
Exactly. Yes.
Thank you so much for it.
Siddhart, once again, thank you so much. And whenever the lockdown ends, dear on me, like I said, guaranteed.
Okay. All right. I would love to meet up with you and maybe meet. I don't mind. Yeah, anytime. Absolutely.
Right. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take it easy. Bye-bye. See ya.